So it's been a little while since I've had time to put together an update. But last November, we started a discussion on gambling mechanisms in video games and the mental health, addiction, and financial consequences they can have for everyone, and particularly developing kids. To say nothing, of course, of what they've done to the unfortunate quality of video games to begin with. And so I want to send a big thank you, first of all, to everyone who responded and stepped up to help get involved, to ultimately fix the gaming industry. We've made contact with elected officials in dozens of states, with US senators and members of Congress. People are starting to really pay attention. Here in Hawaii, this week, it was a big week. It all began a few days ago with another issue that we've been working on here, which is, of course, fixing net neutrality. In Hawaii, our local internet service providers were recently bought out by the usual internet giants, but it means the state of Hawaii has to approve the sale. And so I have to give credit to our governor, who really stepped up to the plate and required these companies to abide by net neutrality as a condition of approving their takeover. So for at least the next 3 years, until we can elect a new president who will install FCC commissioners who will look out for the interest of the people rather than just looking out for the interest of these companies, Hawaii will continue to have an open and fair internet.
This morning, I signed an executive order to maintain net neutrality.
You know, it's so important that internet access in this day and age is available to everyone. It is, by all intents and purposes, a fundamental right that people ought to be able to have access to in order to live their lives, to participate in democracy. But we also joined together to announce that the state of Hawaii will only contract with ISPs that abide by net neutrality going forward. And as the single largest employer in the state, that's not insignificant.
Net neutrality, guys, here we go.
That's right. Good job.
Thank you. Well, I'm so glad that I read that. I'm so glad. And getting the signatures that fast is what made it happen.
But back to gambling in video games and loot boxes for a moment. Here's where things really got going this week. In December and January, we had drafted bills to address the loot box situation, and those bills have been moving through the legislative process. One bill in particular requires the odds of winning items purchased in loot boxes to be disclosed, so players know whether or not they're being taken advantage of. And secondly, it also requires that games with loot boxes that can be purchased disclose on the box or out on the screen at time of purchase that these games have loot boxes within them, so parents can make an informed decision about what may or may not be appropriate for their kids. Just like every state around the country, bills moving through Hawaii and through our legislative process go through a public hearing in which everyone can offer their thoughts and support or oppose the bill, and legislators can hear public feedback, the idea being that we can ultimately make amendments and make the bill better. This is also part of the process where lobbyists chime in. And for several months, the ESA, the Entertainment Software Association of America, has been flying its lobbyists out to Hawaii. The ESA is the trade organization and lobbying arm of all our favorite companies: EA, Activision, Take-Two, Ubisoft, basically every major player in the gaming industry. The ESA lobbyists have been meeting behind the scenes with legislators, but what was really fascinating is to see the industry show up to lobby against the disclosing of odds in loot boxes bill. As far as I know, this is the first time that their lobbyists have ever had to answer questions on this subject matter in front of a camera. Thank you both for your testimony and time. Clearly, just reading through, I think, the comments here and the testimony, the gaming industry is now a $36 billion industry, which is sizable, 3 times the size plus of the film industry in this country. And its rate of growth has been very rapid in the last 5-6 years, which I'm sure provides a significant sense of pride and accomplishment to some of these companies. But I think one of the things that really has precipitated this question is some of the feedback from the community, not just here in Hawaii, but of course elsewhere as well. And since I've been talking about this issue, which originated this bill, and we've heard from hundreds, if not thousands at this point, of folks, stories of addiction and financial harm and horror stories from families, even right here in Hawaii in our own community. I guess the question is it concerning that there are significant numbers of people, and especially kids in many cases, who are ending up with problems with addiction as a result of some of these mechanisms.
Well, Representative Lee, I think first of all, I think that was one of the things that was recognized by the industry to create the board, the review board, the self-imposed review rating board. And if I can recall, I think there is one category for children. They actually have similar to movies. So, you could say movies are
the ESRB referring to.
The ESRB, that they have those ratings and they have it for children. So I think the industry recognized that there was an issue, and so they brought this upon themselves. As a matter of fact, they've taken it one step further. They've gone international to get this rating board approved on their game. So I think they've been very proactive.
I appreciate that. And just on that comment for a moment, the issue of which has been raised here with respect to in-game gambling-like mechanics, loot boxes, that sort of thing, that's something the ESRB currently rates?
I couldn't answer that. I'd have to go back.
Mr. Wade, can you answer that question?
The answer is no. The inclusion of gambling-like mechanics, specifically variable reward microtransactions, do not affect ESRB rating. In fact, the ESRB, one of their few public statements about the issue has been, this is legally not gambling, basically.
So one of the things that I think also the ESA testimony reflected was that this is not gambling, or these sorts of mechanisms are not gambling because they, well, for a number of reasons I'll get into in a minute. The UK Gambling Commission, among others, seems to identify this, or portions of this at least, as gambling. Their annual report recently just found that 45% of 11 to 16-year-olds are aware of what's called skins betting, where you have products which you earn out of randomized loot boxes, which you can purchase, which can then be traded for cash. So fundamentally, that seems to be gambling, if you can cash out these things for real monetary value. Is it not?
I'm not, I cannot answer that.
Well, let's move on. Chair, with your indulgence, I have a couple more questions.
Okay,
Thank you. When it comes to, and just for Bruce again, when it comes to loot boxes and that sort of thing, how does a player know their odds of winning something that they're paying for?
Well, first of all, I think the loot box, isn't that if I recall, that's an option. You have the option of purchasing, or you can, and correct me, but I think you can get to the end game, the same way without the loot box. Is that, if I'm understanding what you're...
I think if people are buying something,
you have the option to go with the loot box.
Sure. Anybody has an option not to walk into a casino, right?
Well, I mean, you also...
But forgive me, when you buy a loot box, if that's something you feel compelled to do as you're playing, how do you know what the odds are of winning something in that?
Can't answer.
Mr. White, can you?
As far as I'm aware, there are no disclosures on the odds, so I haven't seen any at least. And I play a lot of games, so.
I guess, are you guys aware that China has already taken steps to require odds of disclosure for these sorts of in-game mechanisms?
No. Are you aware? I'm not.
Well, let me just wrap it up then. I guess for Bruce one more time. Is there an age either the ESRB, as you had referred to earlier, or the industry has identified as appropriate to play games with these sorts of loot boxes?
Again, I would go back to the rating system. I think the classification identifies what those categories would be.
And then
I can pull it up.
Oh, please go ahead.
I mean, if I may. Well, I mean, no, go ahead. But
No, go ahead.
the point is that the ESRB has this rating system, right?
Correct.
If the ESRB were rating loot box mechanics, then we wouldn't be here. And that's kind of fundamentally the issue, is that you have these tactics that the gaming community is being increasingly identifying as manipulative. And like I said, this isn't a matter of speculation. Like, there's video out there showing the EA CEO, the publisher of Battlefront 2, which is incidentally the reason why we're here. And he's talking about how to design moments of frustration that encourage you to buy loot boxes. And allow me to finish the point. So, when Star Wars Battlefront 2, an EA game, came out, one thing that really shocked players was, one, loot boxes directly affect your ability to progress in the game, right? Two, and this is the thing that really got people's attention, was that when you are killed in the game, there is a screen that shows you what power-ups that are available only through loot boxes were used to defeat you in the game. So like that, there is a direct line between the things that the CEO was saying and the mechanics that were eventually implemented.
But
right?
just for correction, when that came out, wasn't that in beta form? And I think when you came back from the gamers, that it wasn't put in the final game.
Yes, that is correct. Okay. And I believe there's been statements released from EA just in the last few weeks saying they're returning those mechanisms to the game.
Well, that I'm not aware of, but just so we're clear, so when that did come out, it was in beta form, and they did hear back that, so they took it out.
And I appreciate this, Chair. Let me just wrap up. Whether or not, individuals, some families or some parents feel having their children have access to loot boxes and that sort of thing and paying for it is appropriate or not, where would a parent go to find out whether or not a particular game they're looking at buying would be appropriate
to that site,
in that context?
To the site.
To where is that?
I can give you the Entertainment Software Rating Board site. I can give you that address.
That explains whether or not games contain loot boxes?
That I'm not aware of.
I don't know.
But as you just said earlier, they don't rate that, so I can only assume that they don't.
Sure. So if you're in a store here, let's say GameStop down the street, and you're looking at buying a game, is there anything on the game box that will tell you whether or not it's appropriate in that context?
Not that I'm aware of.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
There's a long way for this bill and the others yet to go, and this is a new issue, and it's going to take time to address it. But other states, members of Congress, and regulators are starting to pay attention and ask questions. And it's telling what the answers to those questions, or the lack thereof, demonstrates. But what's most important is that people stay engaged, that you stay engaged, to keep the pressure on the industry up. We can win this fight and reform the predatory practices these game companies employ, and build a better future for gaming for everyone. But it's going to take us all paying attention and working together. So thank you to everyone for stepping up.